The morning sun glowed over the sleepy little town of Ridgeway, where old brick buildings met quiet streets lined with oak trees. In the corner of the park sat a man most people ignored, Tom Reynolds, a 68-year-old veteran in a worn-out wheelchair. His weathered face told stories his mouth rarely did, deep lines from years of service, and eyes that once burned with duty but now held exhaustion. And something else, solitude. Every morning, Tom would roll his chair to the park fountain, feed the birds, and sketch quietly in a battered notebook. The locals had seen him for years. Some nodded politely, others just walked past to them. He was just the old man in the wheelchair. But what they didn't know was that Tom wasn't just any veteran. He was once a decorated army medic, a man who had saved dozens of lives overseas, and had lost more than he could count. The blast that took his legs also took his career, his wife, and slowly, his sense of belonging. Still, Tom carried on quietly, humbly. That morning, the park was busier than usual. A wedding was happening at St. Helena's Chapel, a small church across the street. White ribbons fluttered in the breeze. Music played softly as guests arrived in elegant suits and pastel dresses. The air smelled of roses and excitement. Tom glanced at the church, smiling faintly. He always liked weddings. They reminded him of before. Before the wheelchair, before the loneliness. "Beautiful day for love," he muttered, tossing a piece of bread to the pigeons. At that moment, a young man in a sharp navy suit, Ethan Brooks, the groom, hurried past with his best man. Tom caught the edge of their conversation. "I swear, man, I left the ring in the car. I'll grab it before she walks down," Ethan said, his voice shaking with nerves. Tom chuckled to himself. "Forgot the ring? Happens to the best of us," he whispered, thinking of his own wedding day decades ago. Minutes later, the church doors opened. Guests began to file in, laughter, camera flashes, excitement. Tom watched from across the street, unseen but content. Then he saw her, the bride, Sofia Delgado, a beautiful Latina woman in her late 20s, stepped out of the car in a breathtaking lace gown. The sunlight caught the beads of her dress, making her shimmer. Her smile was nervous, genuine, and full of hope. Her father adjusted her veil, whispering something that made her laugh. The photographer snapped a few shots. It was perfect, until it wasn't. Suddenly, a sharp pop echoed from the side of the church. Someone screamed, then a small burst of orange flame flared near the building's back door. At first, people thought it was a spark from a light or a decoration. But within seconds, smoke began to billow out of the side windows. "Fire! Fire!" someone yelled. Panic erupted. Guests stumbled out, screaming, tripping over one another. The bridal party froze in confusion. The smell of burning fabric filled the air. Tom's heart stopped for a second. Then his instincts kicked in. He wheeled himself toward the chaos as the groom shouted, "Sophia's inside!" She went to fix her veil. Without hesitation, Tom spun his chair and pushed himself across the street, his arms burning, his breath quickening. He didn't think. He just moved. The smoke thickened as he reached a door. People tried to stop him. "Sir, you can't go in there," a guest shouted, but Tom's eyes hardened. "I've been through worse fires than this." He ripped off his jacket, wrapped it around his face, and wheeled straight into the inferno. Inside, the air was thick, choking. The flames crackled along the walls, licking at the drapes. Tom's vision blurred, but he pressed on, shouting through the smoke, "Sophia, can you hear me?" A faint voice answered, "Help! I'm here." He found her near the back, trapped behind a fallen beam. Her white dress was singed at the edges, her face streaked with soot and tears. She looked up, shocked to see an elderly man in a wheelchair coming toward her. "Hold on," Tom yelled. "I've got you." He used the strength in his arms to lift the beam just enough for her to crawl free. Then, wrapping his jacket around her shoulders, he guided her low to the ground, out through the smoke. As they burst through the church doors, the crowd gasped. The bride, coughing, shaking, was being pushed in a wheelchair by a man no one recognized. Paramedics rushed forward. The groom sprinted toward them, grabbing Sophia and sobbing into her shoulder. "Oh my God, you're okay. You're okay." Sophia coughed, looking back at Tom. You saved me, she whispered. Tom smiled faintly, his face blackened with soot. Just doing what I was trained to do, ma'am, and then he passed out. What would you do if you saw someone in danger and everyone else froze? Would you step up? Or wait for someone else to act? Comment below. Hey there, my wonderful family and friends. Welcome back. If you're ready to dive into today's story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from. I love seeing where everyone's watching. And guess what? There's another amazing story coming your way tomorrow. One you definitely don't want to miss. Alright then. Let's get started. The sirens arrived fast. Fire trucks, police cars, and an ambulance. The once cheerful wedding scene had transformed into a whirlwind of chaos and smoke. The crowd stood stunned, whispering among themselves, eyes fixed on the soot-covered veteran in the wheelchair who had rolled into a burning church and come back out alive with the bride. Paramedics hurried to Tom's side. Checking his vitals, he was conscious, but barely. His lips were dry, his breathing ragged, and his hands trembled from exhaustion. Yet, even in that moment, his eyes scanned for Sophia, making sure she was safe. Sir, please stay still, one paramedic said, pressing an oxygen mask over his face. Tom gave a weak smile. Make sure she's okay first. The bride, Ethan, the groom, crouched beside him, tears streaking down his face. Sir, you saved her life. You saved my wife. He paused, voice breaking. Why would you risk your life like that? Tom's voice was raspy. Because that's what soldiers do. The paramedics exchanged puzzled looks. The groom frowned, realizing he was speaking to someone far more than just an old man in a wheelchair. The fire chief approached, removing his helmet. Who is this man? He asked, scanning the faces of the crowd. No one answered. An elderly woman in the crowd whispered, That's Tom Reynolds. He's been around town for years, always in the park, feeding the birds. The chief's eyes widened. Reynolds? As in Sergeant Thomas Reynolds? Heads turned. Murmurs rippled through the gathering like a wave. The name sounds familiar, said one firefighter quietly. Wasn't he the medic from the Ridgeway blast? The one who, yeah, another firefighter cut in, eyes wide. He's the guy who saved his whole unit after that roadside explosion overseas. The fire chief nodded slowly, his voice low and reverent. He pulled 6 men out of that ambush. After losing both his legs, the crowd fell silent. Sophia, wrapped in a blanket, her face streaked with soot and tears, turned toward the veteran. That's who saved me, she whispered. Her father nodded, emotion flooding his face. The priest stepped forward, his voice trembling. Thomas Reynolds has lived in this town for decades. Most didn't know who he was, but now we do. A hush lingered. Cameras flashed. Phones came up. Social media was already buzzing. Hashtag he wrote the wedding, hashtag veteran saves bride within minutes. The story began spreading beyond Ridgeway. Reporters arrived, snapping photos of the man who had risked his life again, despite being in a wheelchair. The paramedics tried to load Tom into the ambulance, but he resisted. Please, he said weakly. Let me see her first. Sophia approached, her wedding dress torn and smoke-stained. She knelt beside him, taking his calloused hand gently in hers. You saved my life, she whispered again, voice trembling. I don't even know how to thank you. Tom smiled faintly. Just live a good one, sweetheart. That's thanks enough. Tears filled her eyes. You could have died in there. Tom's gaze softened. Wouldn't have been the first time I got lucky. She let out a soft laugh, shaking her head. You're a hero. But Tom shook his head slowly. Heroes don't make it home. I just did what I had to. That night, as Tom lay in the hospital bed, hooked to an oxygen line, the news played on a small TV in the corner. The anchor's voice carried a mix of awe and disbelief. A decorated veteran from Ridgeway, Sergeant Thomas Reynolds, risked his life today to save a bride trapped in a burning church. The veteran, who lost both legs in active duty, has lived quietly in town for years. The camera cut to Sophia, speaking outside the hospital. He didn't hesitate. Everyone was panicking, and he just went in. He saved me without thinking twice. He's the bravest man I've ever met. The screen then flashed with images of Tom's service photos. Younger, in uniform, smiling proudly beside his unit. Medals on his chest, dust and sunlight on his face. The comments online poured in fast. This man's a legend. Real heroes don't wear capes. They wear courage. How did no one know who he was all this time? By morning, the hospital room was full of flowers, cards and gifts. People from all over the country had sent messages. Veterans groups offered to honor him at the State Hall. The mayor called him personally, promising a special ceremony. But Tom didn't care about the attention. He just wanted to go home to his little apartment, sit by the window, and watch the birds again. When the nurse came to check on him, he smiled tiredly. "I didn't mean to cause such a fuss," she chuckled. "You saved a bride on her wedding day, Mr. Reynolds. You deserve every bit of fuss." Later that week, Sophia and Ethan visited him. They brought a large framed photograph. The one taken moments after he rolled out of the burning church with her in his arms. The frame read, "To our hero, who reminded us what true courage looks like." Sophia's eyes glistened as she placed the photo beside his bed. "I couldn't get married without inviting you properly," she said softly. "When I walk down the aisle again, for our Narrated ceremony, I want you there." Tom laughed, shaking his head. "Sweetheart, I think I've had enough of weddings and fires for a lifetime." Sophia smiled through her tears. "Then just promise me you'll come anyway." He looked at her, the girl whose life he'd saved, and nodded slowly. "I'll be there. Would you recognize the quiet heroes in your own community? The ones who live humbly, never asking for credit. Tag someone you think deserves recognition in the comments." 2 months later, the town of Ridgeway looked different. Banners fluttered from lampposts reading "Honoring Our Hero." Sergeant Thomas Reynolds, the mayor, had announced a special ceremony at the town square. A day dedicated to the man who had saved a bride from a burning church. And more than that, reminded everyone what true courage looked like. The local news station had been covering the story non-stop. Across social media, videos of the rescue had hit over 20 million views. Comments filled with emojis, tears, and pride flooded every post. For once, the town wasn't divided by politics or gossip. Everyone stood together for a single reason: gratitude. Inside his modest apartment, Tom sat by the window in his wheelchair, watching sparrows flutter around his old bird feeder. Sunlight spilled across his wrinkled hands as he adjusted the worn photograph of his old unit on the windowsill. Every face in that photo was young, strong, full of fire. Half of them didn't make it home. A gentle knock came at the door. It was Sophia and Ethan, both smiling. Dressed neatly for the ceremony, Sophia carried a small box wrapped in blue ribbon. "Morning, hero," she said softly. Tom chuckled. "Still don't think I deserve that title." "Well, we're not asking you," Ethan grinned. "The entire town voted on it." Sophia placed the box in his lap. "Open it." Inside was a neatly pressed navy blue jacket. Military style, but custom made to fit over his wheelchair straps. On the sleeve was an embroidered patch, "Ridgeway's Hero, 2025. Tom blinked, emotion catching in his throat. "You didn't have to. We wanted to," Sophia said, her eyes warm. "Because you deserve to be seen." "Really seen?" He nodded quietly. "Guess I can't say no to that." The town square was packed. Hundreds gathered, families, veterans, students, even strangers who'd driven in from other states after hearing his story. Flags waved gently in the spring air. A stage had been built near the fountain, draped in red, white, and blue. The air buzzed with music and emotion. When Tom arrived, escorted by Sophia and Ethan, the crowd erupted in applause. People stood, cheering. Some saluted, others simply cried. Tom looked overwhelmed. He wasn't used to being the center of attention. The cheers made him feel exposed, like someone had peeled back the quiet life he'd hidden behind for years. The mayor stepped up to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, "today we honor not just a man, but a spirit. Sergeant Thomas Reynolds didn't just save a bride. He reminded us what it means to care for one another, to act when others freeze, to give even when you have nothing left to give." The crowd clapped. "He's lived among us quietly, never asking for recognition. But today, Ridgeway stands proud, because one of our own is a hero." He gestured toward Tom. "Please welcome Sergeant Thomas Reynolds." Tom rolled forward slowly, his hands trembling on the wheels. The crowd hushed. He looked at them, hundreds of faces staring back with admiration. He cleared his throat. I don't know what to say." He started softly, voice shaky. "Most of my life, I never thought I'd see a day like this. I served my country because I believed in something bigger than myself. The idea that we look out for each other." He paused, glancing down at his missing legs, then back up at the crowd. "When I came home, I didn't feel like much of a hero. I felt broken, lost. The world moved on. People forgot. And maybe that's just how life works." The crowd listened in silence. "But that day, when I saw the fire, I didn't think. I just acted. Because courage doesn't disappear. It just waits for a reason to wake up again." The audience stood still, tears shining in eyes, hands clasped to hearts. He smiled faintly. "If my story reminds you of anything, I hope it's this. You don't stop being useful when life knocks you down. There's always something left to give." The crowd erupted, cheering, clapping, shouting his name. "Tom! Tom! Tom!" As the cheers settled, Sophia took the microphone. "I wasn't supposed to speak," she began, her voice trembling. "But I can't stay quiet." She turned toward Tom. "When you saved me that day, you didn't just pull me out of a fire. You reminded me what real love looks like. The kind that doesn't expect anything in return. And because of you, I learned something about faith, bravery, and kindness." Then she smiled mysteriously. "And we have one more surprise for you." A curtain dropped behind her. Gasps spread through the crowd. Behind it stood a large painting, beautifully framed. It was Sophia's wedding portrait, but painted in oil, depicting the exact moment Tom rolled out of the burning church with her in his arms. Flames in the background, sunlight bursting through smoke. His expression, strong yet tender. At the bottom of the painting, in gold letters, were the words, "Some heroes don't wear medals. They carry hearts." Tom's eyes widened. His lip trembled. "You painted this?" Sophia nodded. "Every brushstroke. It's the least I could do." The mayor stepped forward again. "This painting will hang permanently in the Ridgeway Town Hall, as a reminder of what courage looks like." The crowd clapped again, thunderous applause shaking the square. After the ceremony, Tom sat quietly in the park while the sun dipped low behind the trees. Children ran past with small American flags, their laughter echoing in the air. Ethan and Sophia joined him on the bench. Sophia placed a thermos of coffee in his hand. "You know," she said gently, "you didn't just save my life, you changed it." He looked at her, smiling. "How so?" "I used to think heroes were just people in stories," she said. "Now I know they're real. They just hide in plain sight," Ethan added. "We were thinking of naming our first son after you, if that's okay." Tom's eyes softened. "You don't have to, but we want to," Sophia said. "Because names mean legacy." Tom nodded, looking out at the sunset. "Then I'll be honored." Back in his apartment, Tom wheeled up to his window again. The square outside glowed faintly in the distance. He could still hear echoes of applause in his head. He opened his drawer and took out a small box. Inside, his old service medals, slightly tarnished for the first time in years. He pinned one back on his jacket, not for himself, for the men who never came home. He whispered softly to the empty room, "Guess we're still doing some good after all. Boys." He smiled, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, maybe his fallen brothers were smiling back. In a world full of noise and chaos, we often overlook the quiet ones, the forgotten heroes who live among us. But sometimes, all it takes is one act of courage to remind us that greatness doesn't fade with time. It simply waits for a moment to shine again. Would you have the courage to act like Tom did? To risk everything for someone you barely know? Tell us in the comments below. And if this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that real heroes still walk and roll among us. The days following the ceremony were a blur for Tom. People recognized him everywhere, at the diner, the grocery store. Even at the park, kids ran up to him, asking for selfies. Local businesses offered him discounts. and the town's newspaper printed a special Sunday issue titled, "The Hero Among Us: How a Veteran in a Wheelchair Changed Ridgeway Forever." But the attention wasn't all easy to handle. Some nights, the weight of it pressed heavy on Tom's chest. When he closed his eyes, he still saw the flames. He still heard the cracking of wood, the screams, the sound of Sophia's faint voice echoing through smoke. It wasn't just the fire he remembered. It was every fire, every explosion overseas, every fallen friend, every mission that went wrong. The medals on his dresser didn't make the flashbacks stop. It was a rainy Tuesday when Sophia stopped by his apartment again. She found him sitting in the dark, staring at the rain streaking across the window pane. "You missed dinner," she said softly. Tom didn't look away from the window. Didn't feel like being a headline tonight. She walked closer, kneeling beside his chair. "You know, you don't have to hide when you're hurting." He sighed. "Everyone keeps calling me a hero, but they don't know what I've seen, what I've done. Sometimes I don't even know if I deserve the word." Sophia placed her hand gently on his. "Heroes aren't perfect, Tom. They're human. The difference is, they still choose to act." That broke something open inside him. For the first time, Tom let himself cry, silent. Heavy tears that had been locked behind a soldier's stoicism for years. Sophia stayed there with him, in the quiet, no words, just shared pain. The next morning, Tom made a decision. If the town saw him as a symbol, then he'd make sure that symbol meant something real. He reached out to the local veteran center, a place that had been struggling to stay open. He offered to volunteer, helping other vets transition back into civilian life. When he rolled into the center that first day, the other veterans looked surprised. One of them, a burly man named Marcus, grinned and said, "Well, look who finally decided to join the living again." Tom laughed. "Guess it's about time." They started meeting every week, sharing stories, laughing over old memories, crying over the ones they'd lost, and slowly, the heaviness in Tom's chest began to lift. The wheelchair didn't feel like a prison anymore. It felt like a reminder of survival, of purpose. One afternoon, Sophia and Ethan visited the Veteran Center. She brought sketches for a mural she wanted to paint across the building's outside wall. A giant tribute to veterans who continued serving their communities. When she unveiled her sketchpad, Tom's jaw dropped. The mural showed a soldier in a wheelchair lifting a child out of flames. But behind him were ghostly silhouettes of other soldiers, helping push his chair forward. "It's not just about you," Sophia explained. "It's about all of you. The ones who never stopped fighting." Even after coming home, Tom stared at the sketch, deeply moved. "You're something else. You know that?" She smiled. "Takes one to know one." While the world saw a viral headline, Ridgeway saw something deeper. A second chance for a forgotten hero to rise again. But what no one expected was how his next act of courage would inspire the whole nation. 6 months later, Ridgeway hosted its first Veterans Art and Courage Festival. The once quiet town square now buzzed with life. Art booths, live music, therapy dogs, and food trucks surrounded the newly painted mural on the Veteran Center wall. TV crews were there again, but this time, Tom didn't shy away from the cameras. He greeted people warmly, shaking hands, posing for pictures. There was no pity anymore, only pride. The mayor stepped up to the stage, microphone in hand. "Today, we dedicate this mural to all veterans who keep giving even after the battle ends. And to one man who reminded us what heroism really looks like." The crowd turned as Sophia pulled off the white sheet covering the wall. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The mural was stunning, a massive, colorful portrait of veterans in all forms. Men, women, old, young, some in wheelchairs, others standing, all linked by a golden thread of light that wove between them. At the center, Tom, painted just as he looked that day of the fire, holding Sophia in his arms, surrounded by light. Tears glistened in his eyes. "You made me look taller," he joked softly. Sophia grinned. "Art's supposed to exaggerate the truth, remember?" Later that afternoon, Tom sat beneath the mural watching families walk by. Children pointed at the artwork, asking questions about the man in the wheelchair. An older woman approached with her teenage son, who looked nervous. "Sergeant Reynolds," she said. "My son just enlisted. He's been afraid. but after hearing your story, he says he's proud to serve. Tom reached out, shaking the young man's hand. Then you'll do just fine, son. Just remember, bravery isn't about never being scared. It's about acting anyway. The boy nodded, eyes glistening as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky gold and pink. Sophia and Ethan walked Tom home. They laughed, trading stories from the day. At his apartment door, Sophia turned to him, hesitating. "There's something else I wanted to tell you," she said softly. Tom raised an eyebrow. "Another surprise." Sophia smiled nervously. "Ethan and I are expecting." Tom's eyes widened. That's. She nodded, laughing through tears. "And we already know the name. If it's a boy, Thomas." Tom froze, overwhelmed. "You're naming your baby after me?" Ethan grinned. "The man who gave us a second chance at life?" "Yeah, that one." Tom swallowed hard, trying not to cry again. "Guess I'm getting promoted to Uncle Tom, huh?" "More like honorary grandpa," Sophia teased. They laughed together as the streetlights flickered on, glowing softly against the mural in the distance. That night, Tom rolled out onto his small balcony. The air was cool, the stars bright. In the distance, he could see the faint outline of the mural lit by street lamps, his silhouette frozen in color and courage. He whispered quietly to the night sky, "For every one of us who made it home, may we never stop saving lives." In big ways or small, he leaned back, a peaceful smile on his face. And for the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a forgotten veteran. He felt like part of something greater again. A legacy built on fire, courage, and compassion. Sometimes, heroes don't ask for recognition. They don't seek fame or fortune. They just do what's right, even when no one's watching. And sometimes, when the world finally does see them, it remembers what true humanity looks like. Do you believe true heroes still walk among us? The ones who act without expecting anything in return. Tell us in the comments what heroic moment has inspired you lately.
Thank you for watching all the way through. If this story moved you, the next one will surprise you in ways you won't expect. Go ahead and click the video on your screen. Your next story awaits.